heavy thud shattered Frank Harlow's pre-dawn silence. A sound like a body hitting wood. He pushed aside the curtain and his heart stopped cold.
What in the name of? That's a bobcat. A pregnant bobcat.
A massive bald eagle lay beneath the bobcat's paw, one wing twisted at a grotesque angle. The eagle's white head lolled weakly.
It's still alive, and someone banded its leg.
The faded number on the metal band, 8,942, burned into Frank's memory like a brand.
Number. That number. 10 years ago. It can't be the same bird.
His hand moved before his mind could catch up, shoving open the screen door with a rusty screech. Frank's trembling fingers brushed the band. The eagle's eye flickered open, a sliver of wild gold.
You brought him to me, didn't you? You know what I did?
For the first time in 12 years, Frank Harlow felt the weight of something heavier than grief, a reckoning he had been dodging his whole life.
I can't leave him out here. Not like this. Not again.
Frank scooped up the eagle, cradling it against his chest. Its breath came in shallow, wet gasps. 10 years ago, a younger Frank had leveled his rifle at a soaring bald eagle, a reckless, illegal shot. The eagle plummeted, wings snapping against a branch, and vanished into the trees. Frank never searched, never reported it.
I should have finished what I started. Instead, I just walked away. Now look at him.
He brushed the band again, 8,942, then forced himself to examine the broken wing. Infection had already set in.
I can't call anyone. They'll know. A poacher's bullet from 10 years ago. They'll lock me up.
So Frank reached for the old hunting first aid kit and pointedly ignored the license lying in the drawer. He splinted the shattered wing with steady hands and wrapped it tight with gauze. Outside, the bobcat sat motionless on the porch railing, watching through the window with unnerving patience. By morning, the bobcat hadn't left. She was curled against the door, shivering, her belly swollen with unborn kits.
She's pregnant. She'll need shelter, or she'll lose those kittens to the cold.
Frank dragged a cardboard box into the shed, lined it with old flannel and straw, and set it in a corner. The bobcat watched warily from the doorway, then crept inside, sniffing the makeshift nest.
That's it. Now she's got a safe place to give birth.
Inside the cabin, the eagle lay on a towel-lined crate, its bandaged wing resting motionless. Frank spoke softly to it.
I'm gonna call you Justice. Seems like you deserve some.
That name stirred something. Every time he said it, he thought of Margaret, Maggie, his wife, who would have scolded him for the rifle in his hands that day.
Maggie always said I had a blind spot the size of a mountain when it came to animals. She was right.
He looked out at the shed, the bobcat now resting inside, and for a moment, he felt like someone, or something, was pushing him toward a second chance. Days blurred. Frank stopped answering the phone. He skipped his usual supply run, afraid someone might spot the eagle through a window. On the fourth morning, despair drove him into Maggie's old study, a room he'd barely entered since her funeral. There, beneath a stack of gardening books, lay her leather journal. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting. The 12th of October. Checked on the eagle again. His wing is healing, but he still can't fly far. Left fish near the old pine. The 3rd of March. Found a bobcat cub near the creek. So small. His mother must be dead. I named him Scout.
She was feeding Justice all those years, and she raised a bobcat. Without telling me.
He flipped through more pages. Records of anonymous donations to a wildlife clinic, a receipt for special bird feed, then a faint pencil sketch. A bobcat cub with a torn ear, just like the notch he'd noticed on the porch cat.
My wife was a secret wildlife rehabilitator, and I never saw it.
He pressed the journal to his chest, her handwriting blurring through tears. The mystery of the bobcat's arrival had only deepened. The sharp knock, official, impatient, came 3 days later. Frank froze, spoon halfway to his coffee.
Frank, It's Evelyn Cross from the council. I've called 6 times. People are starting to talk.
She can't come in. Not now.
He threw a tarp over the eagle's crate and kicked the shed door shut before the bobcat could yowl.
Frank, you are not sick, are you? Because you look like you've seen a ghost.
After she left, Frank grabbed the phone and dialed the wildlife clinic, his voice deliberately casual.
Doc needs some hypothetical advice. If a man found an injured eagle, what should he do?
Mr. Harlow, hypothetically, that man would be committing a federal felony. He needs to call authorities immediately.
He hung up, then peeled back the bandage. Infection had spread, red tendrils creeping toward the bird's chest.
No healing. And now the doc's suspicious. I am running out of time.
That night, Frank dug out Maggie's old trail camera, still working, and strapped it to the pine beside the shed. At dawn, he retrieved the memory card, hands trembling from more than the cold. He fed the card into Maggie's laptop and cued the footage, his coffee going cold beside him. The first clip caught the bobcat with a dead mouse in her jaws, padding straight toward the eagle's crate. She dropped the rodent inches from Justice's beak, then sat back on her haunches, watching the bird eat.
She's feeding him. A wild bobcat is feeding an eagle. That's not instinct. That's something else.
Another time-lapse clip, the bobcat staring directly into the lens for 6 minutes, tail flicking.
She knows the camera is there. She's not scared of it. This cat was raised by people.
But he had no proof it was Maggie's cub. Not yet. Just a hunch that his wife's secret reached farther than he'd ever imagined. The trail camera stayed up. The mystery thickened. And Frank knew he was only seeing the beginning. Frank returned to Maggie's study and sat before her dusty, untouched computer. He opened the recovered recycling bin and found a folder, Bobcat Rehab. Inside were photos, a tiny cub nursing a bottle, then one with a bandaged paw, Maggie cradling it.
She didn't just find a cub. She raised it, bottle-fed it, nursed it back to health.
Then an email from a wildlife supply company, shipment of formula, an enclosure kit.
All these years, right under my roof, and I never noticed.
A video played. Maggie laughing as the cub pounced on a feathered toy, its torn ear already visible. Frank zoomed in on the ear, the same notch he'd seen on the bobcat in his shed. But his mind refused to connect the dots. He shut the laptop, the images searing his mind, and stared at Maggie's photograph.
I hunted everything my whole life, but the one thing worth protecting was right here, and I never saw it.
3 days later, with Justice barely lifting his head and the infection spreading, Frank called Dr. Hammond again. This time, he didn't pretend.
Dr. Hammond, it's Frank Harlow. I have the eagle. He's dying. Please.
An hour later, headlights swept the cabin. Frank led Dr. Elaine Hammond into the darkened shed, her vet bag thumping against her hip.
Lift the wing for me. This infection is worse than I thought. You let it go too long. I'll give him a broad-spectrum antibiotic and clean the wound. But you understand, this is illegal.
I know. I shot him 10 years ago. I owe him this. Can you save him?
Maybe. But when he's healed, you release him. For now, I'll prescribe something and check back in a week.
As she packed her tools, her gaze flicked toward the pregnant bobcat, watching from the shed doorway.
She's yours, I take it? I won't ask. But Frank, whatever else is going on here, you are on borrowed time.
Borrowed time. But at least Justice has a chance. Now I just need to survive long enough to see him fly.
The bobcat went into labor in the dead of night, her low growls the only sound breaking the stillness. By dawn, 3 wet kittens lay against her flank, mewling weakly, their eyes sealed shut.
3 new lives. After all the death I've caused, 3 new lives.
He knelt in the straw and named them, one by one. Sage, cedar, poppy. Tiny names for tiny creatures.
Maggie always wanted children. Instead, she gave her heart to the wild ones. Now they're my responsibility.
The bobcat watched him with guarded amber eyes, but she did not hiss as he adjusted the straw. Frank spread an extra blanket beside the nest and retreated to let her nurse in peace.
A wildlife sanctuary, under my roof, and no one can know. Not yet.
But as he shut the shed door, he felt something he hadn't carried in years, hope, and somewhere he thought Maggie might be smiling down on this improbable hidden family. The memory tugged him outside to where Maggie's old trail camera still hung on the pine, its lens clouded but intact. He popped the card free and carried it inside like a wounded thing, slotting it into her dusty laptop. The first file loaded, daylight in the shed, Maggie kneeling in the straw, a tiny bobcat cub suckling a bottle.
That torn ear. It's the same pattern. My wife raised this cat from the day she found it in the creek.
He scrolled through months. The cub pouncing on feathers, the release into the woods, then a new setting, a clearing with a wooden feeding platform. The eagle, band 8942, hopped into frame, its wing bent but eyes fierce.
Justice, you old brute. Still holding on? Here, I brought fish.
She called it justice. Just like I did without knowing. Every word was meant for me. The journal dates line up. The bobcat learned from her to bring wounded creatures here for help. This was her plan.
Frank lowered his head and sobbed, years of grief and guilt breaking loose. Finally, he understood his wife's final message. For 3 days, Frank paced the cabin, the truth eating at him like acid. Then he reached for the phone.
Evelyn, it's Frank Harlow. I need to speak at the next town meeting. It's about something I did.
You sound serious, Frank. The agenda's set, but I can squeeze you in. You okay?
Number. I am not okay, but I'll explain at the meeting. Just give me 5 minutes.
He hung up and stared at Maggie's photograph on the mantel. The silence in the room was heavier than any sound.
I could still cancel, say it was a mistake, keep the secret and just ride it out.
But then he looked at the journal open on the table, at the words I named him, Scout in her careful hand.
Number. She trusted me with this, even after I was gone. If I back down now, I am not the man she believed I was.
He sat at the kitchen table and began to write out his confession, cross-referencing dates from the journal, trembling as he put his crime on paper.
They'll probably arrest me, but at least they'll know the truth. And maybe, just maybe, they'll see the sanctuary.
Frank carried a covered pet crate into the town hall, setting it beside the podium as the audience exchanged uneasy glances.
I am Frank Harlow. I hunted these woods for 40 years. Tonight I am going to tell you about the worst shot I ever took. 10 years ago, I illegally shot a bald eagle. I never reported it. That bird is in this crate, and I've been caring for him.
He reached into his pocket and held up his hunting license for all to see. Then he tore it in two.
This license is worthless to me now. I am surrendering it, and I'll accept whatever punishment comes. My wife spent her last years undoing my damage. She raised a bobcat, fed this eagle. The bobcat brought him to me because she knew I needed to make things right.
He pointed to the band on the eagle's leg. 8,942, the same number from the trail camera footage his wife had left behind.
I am dedicating my land as a wildlife sanctuary in her name. The animals will be protected, and I'll be its caretaker.
The room fell into a dead silence. No one moved. Evelyn's face was unreadable, fingers frozen on her pen.
They hate me. But it's done. The truth is out. Now, I'll pay for it.
When the room finally stirred, a few townspeople surged forward, some with raised voices, others with tear-streaked faces.
Frank, some folks want your head on a pike. The council's split, but I'll push for a sanctuary vote.
An old logger spat on the floor and stormed out. 2 days later, Frank handed over his old rifle to a wildlife officer along with a signed citation, a fine, no jail.
No jail. Just a fine. They said my cooperation made the difference.
He watched the officer's truck disappear down the gravel road, then sank onto the porch step.
Now I just have to prove to this town that I am not the monster they think I am.
He called Elaine, his voice cracking with relief. She actually laughed, a rare sound.
Frank, you are a stubborn fool. But maybe now you can actually do some good with that land.
Frank hung up and looked at the bobcat nursing her kittens in the shed. The sanctuary wasn't official yet, but it suddenly felt real. The next morning, Frank drove past the general store without stopping, his truck rumbling toward the old cemetery at the edge of town. He knelt in the damp grass beside her headstone, Margaret Harlow, and for a long time, he said nothing at all.
Maggie, I spent 40 years hunting everything that moved. But the hardest thing I ever killed was your trust. I am sorry.
His voice cracked, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his cheeks.
But you never gave up on me. You sent that bobcat to finish what you started. Justice is healing, Maggie. I am trying to heal too.
He placed a small, smooth stone on the headstone, an old gesture she had taught him, and let out a breath that felt like years of poison leaving his lungs.
She would have loved those kittens. She'd have named them all wildflowers. Now I have to finish what she started.
By the time he climbed back into his truck, his shoulders were no longer hunched, as if some unseen weight had finally been lifted.
No more running. I'll release Justice when he's ready, build the sanctuary, and earn back whatever I can.
When he pulled into the drive, the bobcat was waiting on the porch, tail flicking, and for the first time, Frank smiled at her. The next morning, Frank opened the door to find his porch crowded with foil-covered dishes and bags of birdseed.
What the casseroles? From who?
Before he could process it, Evelyn's truck pulled up with 3 volunteers, tools clattering in the bed.
Morning, Frank. The council voted. Your sanctuary is approved. We even got a state grant for a visitor center.
You are serious. I thought, after what I did.
People see the good now. You owned up. Now let's get those enclosures built. We brought lumber and lunch.
All day, hammers echoed across the property as strangers became neighbors, building flight cages and bobcat runs under Frank's direction.
12 years I've been alone. Now I've got a whole town on my land. And they're not here to gawk, they're here to help.
When the sun dipped low, a young boy handed Frank a drawing of the bobcat and eagle. Frank taped it to the shed wall. That evening, Frank ate a casserole on the porch, the bobcat at his feet, and felt something he hadn't felt since Maggie died. Community. Justice perched on a low branch of the old pine, his once shattered wings spreading wide and strong.
He's ready. No more infection. No more limping. Time to let him go back where he belongs.
He called Elaine, and she came with her vet bag for one last examination.
Full range of motion, no infection. Justice is ready, Frank. You've done something good here.
That afternoon, Frank built a sturdy crate, lining it with pine shavings and one of Maggie's old flannel shirts.
This shirt still smells like her. Maybe it'll keep him calm on the drive.
That night, Frank sat by the window and wrote a letter, his handwriting shaky but deliberate. Dear Maggie, tomorrow justice flies. I'll read this out loud, so everyone knows you were the one who truly saved him.
I've got one chance to say this right. Maggie's last message. Now it's mine to deliver.
At sunrise, Frank loaded the crate into his truck. In the rearview mirror, he saw the bobcat watching from the porch, as if to say, "Go finish this." He gripped the steering wheel, then let go. One thing left. He climbed out and walked back inside. He went to the bookshelf, pulled down her worn copy of Walden, and a sealed envelope fell onto the floor. My dearest Frank, if you are reading this, I am gone. Please don't grieve too long. You have work to do. I've been feeding an eagle you once injured. I raised a bobcat cub. I did it for you, Frank. I knew you had a good heart beneath all that gristle. Be kind to the animals. They'll teach you how. Frank sank onto the edge of the bed, the paper shaking in his hands. A sob escaped him. raw and unashamed.
She planned this. She knew I'd read it when I was finally ready to listen. I am listening now, Maggie.
He folded the letter back into the book and placed it beside her photograph, the candle still flickering from the night before.
I'll make you proud. Today justice flies, and this land becomes yours forever.
He walked back out to the waiting truck, the letter's final line echoing in his chest. You are not the worst thing you ever did. Frank drove past the general store and turned onto the rutted road leading to the sanctuary meadow. A small crowd already gathered in the golden light. He lifted the crate onto a flat rock, and Evelyn stepped forward, offering a steadying hand.
Before I let him go, I want you to hear this. My wife Maggie wrote it years ago, and I just found it. Be kind to the animals. They'll teach you how. You are not the worst thing you ever did.
Frank knelt and unlatched the crate. For a heartbeat, Justice didn't move. Then the eagle launched, wings pounding the air, rising in a tight spiral above the pines. The crowd gasped, then cheered. Some wept openly. A reporter's camera clicked rapid fire.
He's flying. After 10 years, he's flying free. Thank you, Maggie.
Frank watched until the eagle was a speck, then lowered his head, tears streaming openly. Evelyn wrapped an arm around his shoulders, and for the first time, Frank let the town see him cry. Months later, on a bright spring morning, a cloth-covered wooden sign stood at the entrance to the property. Frank pulled the cord, and the cloth fell away, revealing freshly carved letters, Maggie Harlow Wildlife Sanctuary.
This land belonged to a woman who saw what I couldn't. Every animal here is her legacy, and my apology.
He then opened a small carrier and released a rehabilitated red-tailed hawk, a symbol of the sanctuary's ongoing work. Nearby, the bobcat lounged on a sun-warmed rock, her 3 nearly grown kittens tumbling playfully in the enclosure. The visitor center was small but bright, filled with children's drawings and a framed copy of Maggie's journal page.
You've given this town something we didn't know we needed, Frank. A second chance doesn't just belong to the animals.
Frank shook her hand, then pulled her into a brief, gruff hug that drew chuckles from the crowd.
It's done, Maggie. Your sanctuary is real. They know your name now.
High overhead, an eagle circled, a silhouette against the blue, as if approving of everything below. A month later, Frank stood before the Regional Conservation Council, a polished plaque in his weathered hands. The room was filled with dignitaries and reporters, but Frank only saw Maggie's smile in the camera flashes.
I spent 40 years taking from the wilderness. This award belongs to my wife, who gave back in secret. The bobcat that brought me the eagle brought me back to life. That's the only trophy I need.
Applause erupted, but Frank barely heard it. He was already thinking about the quiet evening ahead. That evening, he sat on his porch. The bobcat stretched out beside him, her head resting on his knee.
Peace. After all these years, real peace.
He stroked her tawny fur, and the last knot of grief in his chest finally loosened. The sunset painted the sanctuary gold, and Frank knew his purpose was here, among the creatures Maggie loved. He was no longer a hunter. He was a guardian. A single tear traced the lines of his cheek, but this one didn't sting. It felt like release.
Thank you. For the eagle, for the bobcat, for not giving up on me.
The bobcat lifted her head and nudged his palm with a soft, rumbling purr. In that small gesture, Frank felt the weight of 1,000 silent pardons he never thought he deserved. The sun slipped below the ridge, gilding the sanctuary valley with its final light.
She would have loved this view. She always said the world righted itself at dusk.
The bobcat curled closer, her flank rising and falling with each steady breath. Another tear fell, but this one was pure gratitude for Maggie, for the animals, for the second chance he never saw coming. He patted the worn floorboards, and the bobcat nestled against his leg, her trust absolute. And as the first star appeared, Frank Harlow was, at last, whole. The Maggie Harlow Wildlife Sanctuary thrived, its gates open to all who sought healing. School buses arrived on weekdays, unloading children who would feed the hawk and learn to track the bobcat. The bobcat and her now-grown kittens had become the sanctuary's wild ambassadors. And high above, an eagle with a faded leg band still circled, as if keeping watch. Frank walked the trails daily, his hunting rifle long gone, his hands now gentle on a child's shoulder. On quiet evenings, he would pause at the entrance, tracing the letters of her name with his gaze. Children who once feared the wild now pressed their hands to the enclosure fence. Mesmerized, justice still returned some afternoons, a speck against the clouds, a reminder that mercy circles back. The hunter who once took life now spent his days restoring it, one creature at a time. And Frank Harlow, the feared hunter who found redemption through 4 paws and 2 wings, was finally home.